Okay, so we're going to talk about short form citations now, and this basically is going to help you so that you don't have to spend time fully citing cases every single time you use them. There's two types of short form citations. One is an abbreviated form and one is ID, which I'm just going to refer to as ID. You can look at Blue Book Rule B 4.2, that's in the blue pages, or Rule 4.1, that's in the white pages. So this is an example of an abbreviated form. This example we used in the full citation video. This is how it gets broken down into a short form. Basically, you still keep one party's name, the first party, the volume number, the reporter, and then instead of including the page number it starts at, a pin site, the quarter, and the year, you just can put the page number. So at 101 is the page number that the information is found on. I did also just want to point out that this is a citation to the case, right? But when you're using this in your memo, you always need to include a pin site. So this doesn't have a pin site because it's just wherever the case is found. A pin site again is going to be a comma and then the page number. So it might say comma 97 or 101, or it might say comma 90. If the information you found is on page 90, you need to include a pin site to page 90. The other short form citation is ID. So here it's ID and then the period should be either italicized or underlined. As opposed to here, the comma is not included in that. So, but it is. You use ID if you're referring to an immediately preceding authority. So if in sentence 1 you cited to Snape v. Weasley and in sentence 2 you're using that case again, you can use ID. If it's an identical pin site, just put ID. So if it's found on the same page. If it refers to a different page or a footnote within Snape v. Weasley, you would say ID at whatever page it's on. So ID at 4 it's page 4. The important thing to remember is that you can only use it when it's the immediately preceding citation and it has one authority. So if you have a string cite, which is when you have many sources within a citation, you can't use ID because it's going to be too confusing for your reader to know what exactly you're citing to. And the point of legal writing is to make everything as easy as possible for our reader. This is just going over abbreviations, so what you can abbreviate. This is another example of a short form from this full citation. One thing that I want to point out is that the Blue Book tells you that you don't always have to include the party name. You can just use this part, the volume number and the reporter and the page number. So it's kind of up to you, your style, but I would say if you cite this case fully on page 1 and then a little bit further down you're using the same case again, but you don't want to fully cite it, I would not include the party name. You probably don't need it then. But if you cite this case on page 1 and you don't use it again until page 10, you can use a short form citation, and this time I would include the party name just so that your reader's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that case. Yeah, now I remember. So this is just a little example that I came up with showing full citation and short form citation together, so you can see how it works. So professors should have total discretion to issue punishments in their classrooms. This is coming from our fake case Snape v. Weasley. This is a full citation, and the information is found on page 97. An exception arises when the professor is under the influence of appearance-altering substances. This is a different case, Crouch v. Dumbledore. This is fully cited as well. You see that there's a pin site. Then otherwise, professor knows best. Okay, so now we're going back to our first case, Snape. Here, like I said, you don't necessarily need to include Snape. It's kind of just, I include it just to be safe, but you really don't need it. You can just use this. And then even a professor who strays from the normal punishment procedure should be given deference, ID. So what I'm telling my reader now is that this assertion is coming exactly from here. It's coming from page 101. From this case, everything's the same. Any issues with procedure should be taken up with the school administration, ID at 105. What I'm telling my reader now is that this assertion comes from this case, but it's on page 105 instead of page 101. So hopefully that gives you a short little view of how you can include both things. The last thing to talk about is prior and subsequent case history. This is Blue Book Rule 10.7. So if this is the case or the opinion that you're citing to, you would want to include subsequent history probably as a general rule. okay, because these are the Supreme Court's binding. However, if you're citing to a Supreme Court case, you probably, as a general rule, don't need to cite to the prior history because the Supreme Court is the highest court, so that's what we care about. We don't care about what the other courts said. So this kind of just says the same thing, and it would tell you the exceptions, etc. On the prior history, really, if, again, the exceptions, if it's significant, or if the prior history included like case facts and the higher court didn't include case facts, that might be a time when you want to do it. So, okay, and just the very last thing, a good page in your blue book to note is table T8, because this is going to give you the explanatory phrases that you would use if you're using prior or subsequent history. And it's important when you see them on the chart. If it has a comma, that means that you use a comma, and if it doesn't have a comma, you don't. I know it seems kind of like duh saying that, but some of them don't have commas, so you don't need to use it. Okay, so this says, in the immediately preceding sentence of a legal memorandum and without an intervening cite, you cited to Honjaras v. City of Atlanta, 65 Southeastern 356, Georgia Court of Appeals, 1909. You wish to cite to page 357 of the case. You have been referring to this case in text as Honjaras. So the important thing that's going to stick out to you, hopefully, is immediately preceding sentence. So when you see immediately preceding sentence, that should hopefully, a ding should go off in your head that you can use id if it's the immediately preceding sentence. So it's the same case, so we're going to put id. It needs to be either underlined or italicized. I'm just going to italicize the whole thing. Actually, let me make this a little bit bigger. So id, and then, okay, so our case started at 356. See, this is actually a mistake. It says without an intervening cite, you cited to Honjaras v. City of. If you're an intervening cite, you didn't have a pin cite, that's wrong. But I got this example off of the Lexis citation workshop, so I can't be blamed. But anyways, so we're assuming that it was on page 356. And now you want to cite to page 357, so you do id at 357, period. That's it. That's all you need. Okay, let's try one more. So this one is on page 2 of your legal memo. You cited to Reiner v. State. In the same general discussion on page 4 of your memo, you would like to cite to Reiner again, only you would like to focus your reader's attention on information beginning on page 402 and continuing on page 403 of the court's opinion. You have cited to other cases on pages 3 and 4 of your memorandum. So because we have other cases in between our second page and our fourth page, which will likely be the case if you're writing something, we can't do an id, so we have to do an abbreviated short form. So the first thing that you're probably going to want to include is, I would include the party's name here, Reiner, because you've got pages in between. So Reiner, that needs to be either italicized or underlined, not the comma, remember. Then your volume number 1, SO2D, and then we are starting on page 402 and continuing to page 403. So then you would say at 402 to 03, period. You can drop the first number. You keep 2 numbers like this when you're using numbers. That's how Blue Book tells you to do it. So this one would just be like that, and that's how you do the short form citation. So hopefully this is starting to make a little bit of sense. It's not taking you too long, and if you have any questions about how exactly I got these answers, please let me know.